Nice to see you. Hello. And a good day to everybody. So this is the second and a presentation for the next webinar that will start next Sunday, the 4th of October. The title of the webinar is Self-Image and True Identity. Now, this webinar, it's actually a fundamental and, if you want, cutting edge understanding about personality and how we function in our day-to-day life. Because, and I say that it's cutting edge because most people, even though most people have a general understanding of what is personality, very few people actually have a real deep understanding, first of all, of what is the ego, and second, of what is a self-image. So, to make it very simple, imagine that personality is like a cake, yeah? With all different tastes and colors, and there is sugar, and there is this and that and that. And then at the very top of the cake, there is a little cherry. Okay, the ego identity is actually the cherry, is the center of and the top of the cake. If you take away the cherry, if you take the ego identity from the personality collapses because it doesn't have a center. It doesn't have a point or reference. So it is absolutely fundamental that we understand that even though the personality is what we encounter and meet on our day-to-day life, because personality is made of problems, of beliefs, of sets of values, of ways of thinking, of ways of looking at reality, of judgments and prejudices. All of this can only exist if there is a central identification core which makes everything, makes everything work. Otherwise, it would not be possible. And when I say that, that's where the fundamental core of the misunderstanding lays. Because this central core identity, which we call the ego identity, is actually non-existential. It does not exist as an entity. While we can recognize a belief system, we can recognize a judgment, we can recognize a thought, we can recognize a habit, we will never find this central identity because it's not existentially real. It is just an illusion that we carry when we put together all the functioning of the personality. We believe that because everything works and functions together, there must be a central identity. And when we do this operation of believing that because there is this all functioning of our ideas, our emotions, our thoughts, our beliefs, when we do this and we believe that all this works because there is a central identity, we create this delusion, which is called the ego identity. So the ego identity is a non-existential thing, does not exist. It's just the after effect of an identification with our functioning, as a personality. Buddha, when he explains this understanding, uses a very beautiful and simple image. He uses the image of a wheel. And he says, every wheel has spokes, yeah? Okay? That connect the periphery to the center. But for the wheel to function, the center has to be empty. Otherwise, you cannot put the wheel on anything to make it go around. So the center of our personality, which we believe that exists as our core control system, is actually nothingness. There is nothing there. There is no ego. The ego is simply an idea that we have created because we function through personality. So whenever you think of yourself and you think of your personality, think at yourself as a wheel that has all these functioning. So thoughts, emotions, ideas, beliefs, and at the center is empty. And this is not something that we can actually just understand intellectually. That's why it's fundamental, the question, who am I? Because when I really ask myself the question, who am I, or who is in, I move literally from the periphery, which is the functioning of the personality, to the core. I come closer and closer and closer and closer and closer and closer and closer to the center. And when I touch the center, I realize that there is nothing. There is nobody there. There is no I. The I is just an idea in the mind. Now, this, for the personality, is not easy to accept. That's why very few people go all the way and ask, who am I, until they reach that point where there is nobody there. Because the whole idea of the personality is, I exist as a separate entity and I am the doer. I am the one who is moving the hands. I am the one who is speaking. I am the one who is listening. I am the one who is wiggling on the chair. Yes. And that makes us feel relevant. I feel relevant because I create this delusion of existing as a separate entity. And that's being relevant is also the root of our suffering. Because internally, we know that this idea of existing as a separate entity is a self-deception. And how do we know? We know it because all the moments of joy, of ecstasy, of pleasure, of enlightenment, of beauty are moments when we are not there. We are not interfering with what is happening. We are not saying, oh, this is me. No, we are. That's the moment of orgasmic joy is when we disappear as an entity, as an idea that we exist separate. Now, I know that in this moment, I'm kind of pushing the envelope, okay? And coming out with like that. And that's how it is. Yeah, I'm not deciding to do it because there is nobody here who is deciding. That's what is happening. That's how the truth is manifesting itself in this specific organism in this moment. So this is one of the fundamental understandings that I will be working with when I and my valiant team Siddhartha, Vistar, and Ketan, we will work on true identity. What does it mean, true identity? How we find out our true identity? Well, it's actually very simple. We just lift the veil of the false identity. It's not difficult. It's just a very precise understanding and a movement towards that core of nothingness, which is our true nature. So this is going to be the main fundamental one of the fundamental elements of this webinar. Now, what this has to do with self-image? Well, self-image is how we deceive ourselves in believing that we exist as a separate entity. Now, self-image, which also has a correspondent image of the world, is not something we are born with. Self-image is something that has been growing within us through the first few years of life. In fact, self-image is just a collection of memories. Memories, for example, of our first interactions with our mother, our crib, our room, our father, our siblings, if we had. All these relations that happen create a certain kind of create traces in our memory, and they start congealing as we grow up, and they start forming images. So I have a certain image of myself that grows up in the first few years of life. For example, I can have the image of myself that I am an impulsive, outgoing, reaching out person. Or I can have the opposite image, that I am an introvert, that I don't really like to come in contact with people. Yeah. And that when I'm introvert, I have a certain image of my mom, because when I'm introvert, my mom responds to me in a certain way. And when I am an extrovert, my mom responds to me in another way, and then reality, and so on. So all these imprints become memories, and they start acting as if they were reality. And they do that by becoming definitions. So I am an introvert person. I mean, you might think that it's not exactly what shows up, but I believed, and I was told, that I was an introvert person for the first 30 or 40 years of my life. Simply because, I was not particularly interested in interrelationship, in what was considered the normal and regular way. So in my family, the basic definition was, my older brother was the extrovert and I was the introvert. These definitions becomes self-image. So I act out as an introvert, and I move in life as an introvert, and I believe that that's me. And that's not true. It's just memories. that have to do with survival. So the self-image is like the cocoon that we create to protect a certain kind of idea of who I am and who am I supposed to be in a certain environment, in a certain society. So some of us become the smiling, nice girl or boy, you know, so wherever they go, they have this smile, you know, like, oh yes, I'm such a good boy, I'm such a good girl. Some other becomes the angry, pissed off, you know, kind of pain in the ass, you know, guy, or some other people become the one that is constantly competing and for success, for being seen. So this is not who we are. This is the cocoon, the story that we keep telling ourselves, and we keep hypnotizing ourselves with these stories. And that is a self-image. Now, to each story, to each self-image I have, there is a correspondent image of the world. So the other effect of having a self-image is that we create, I can't say naturally because it's not natural, we create compulsively, actually, an image of the world we live in. So if I am a competitor and that's my image, I need to create a world where competition has to happen all the time, because that's the way that I can reinforce my ideas about myself. If I am an angry person, I need to create a world where I continuously find people to fight with, and so on. So the implication of all this is quite intense, because the fundamental implication is that we have no fucking clue of what the world is in reality. We don't see the world. We don't live in the world. We live in an idea, in a description, in an image of the world that we continuously keep creating. The world is something completely different. The real is something completely different. It does not have all these beliefs, all these judgments, all these opinions, all these points of view intrinsic to it. Not at all. All that we put on the world has to do with us, has to do with our own image and our own identification with a certain idea of ourselves. So as long as we live in this absurdity, there is no real taste of freedom, because we are bound to repeat over and over and over and over again the same movie with little variations. Yeah, because fortunately enough, we are creative enough to change a little bit. So sometimes what was the chapter number 2 becomes chapter number 5, what was chapter number 5 becomes chapter number 3, and and we mix the things. It's like as if we live in the same house all our life, and because we keep changing the furniture from one room to another, we think, oh, everything is new. Same furniture, same house. We just move the furniture from one room to another, which is not a bad thing, but also you can see how limiting it is if you consider the possibility that actually the whole world is available, not just the house we live in. So this is going to be a quite strong and intense adventure if you jump into it, which is going to demand a lot from you, because you're going to start having to really look at what do you really know about yourself. What are your beliefs and ideas about the real? What is this thing that you call reality? And I want you to notice that there is a difference, at least in the language that I use, between the real and reality. The real is everything. And reality is that little tiny, thing that we see through our own image. And we call it reality, because it makes us feel a little bit more at ease. So reality and the real, they're not the same thing. So this is going to be a challenging webinar, in the sense that for 3 weeks, including the modules, plus another couple of weeks after the modules before the last meeting. So for 5 weeks, my invitation is going to be to really dive deeply, intensely into your own beliefs about yourself. Do you really need an identity? Is that identity something that has to do with who am I, or the identity is just a social convention? Something which has nothing to do with being. Do you need an identity to have an orgasm? Say, oh, I am coming, and I am a doctor, and I'm coming as a doctor, and I'm coming as a... Hello? Do you need a fucking identity, to love someone? Do you need an identity to look at a beautiful sunset, or to listen to some music? Identity is a social convention. It has nothing to do with who we are. I'm not saying that it's wrong. Of course, if you go for a job, or you go and rent a car, you're going to need a piece of paper that says this is your name. Okay? But it's a social convention to do with who we are. So we can live in the delusion. So I ask people, who are you? And they say, oh, I work in this factory and I do this job. I say, what the fuck it has to do with you? This is what you do, not who you are. I meditate every day. So what? Does that define who you are? No, it doesn't. That's what you do. So this is going to be, it's not going to be a piece of cake. It's going to be challenging. It's about really going to the very core of your belief system about yourself. So we are not working with the personality. We are not working with the problems. We are not working with the judgment. That's important, but we are going straight for the cherry. Yeah, the center. Because only when you arrive there, then you can feel satisfied. You can feel at home. You can start relax. So relaxation really has to do with this point, which Osho calls the eye of the cyclone, being at the center of the cyclone, that point where there is nothing happening, where there is no turmoil, where there are no waves. And once that you even taste for a second that place, that gives you a completely different perspective on yourself and the real. And your relationships too, of course. So, this is going to be quite a journey. And personally, I love it. I love it because it's a no bullshit. It's no new age stuff. It's no beating around the bushes. It's really about, okay, how can I really look at the very core of myself? So to do that, the webinar is structured in such a way that we're going to have, for people that have not done other webinars before, we're going to have guided meditations. We're going to have introduction to specific aspects of what I just described, where we can go in depth into looking into it. And we're going to have inquiry so that you can dive into a specific thing. For example, my self-image in relation to the world. How do I present myself to the world? How do I want to be seen? How do I want to be perceived? Because all this is a fundamental part of my prism. The fact that I want to be perceived or seen in a particular way makes me a slave of the people that are going to see and perceive me. Because I depend on what they say and see. So it's about really bringing attention to how we create our own chains and taking responsibility. So this can be, for example, quite challenging for some people. For example, you go to in America, no, and every American believes I'm a good person. And they have this kind of absolute self-deception that everybody has to be a good person. Now, of course, no, everybody has a completely different idea what a good person is. But already having this idea that I have to be a good person, what does it mean? What is a good person? Who gives the definition of a good person? How do I make myself dependent from other people that they look at me and I hope or I manipulate them so that they can think that I am a good person? What do I have to prove? So there is going to be inquiry, which is a fundamental part of the webinar. And then we're going to do some open sessions where there is question and answers. We process different issues that come up. But also I want to make clear that the most important part of the webinar is not only what we do together, is what you do by yourself or with the other participants in the week, in the space between the modules. Because it's important that you keep inquiring, you keep being curious about what comes up. So to help that, we have created a private group on Facebook where you will be invited to participate if you are enrolled in the webinar. And there we're going to have a sheet where every day you can write your name and say, oh, I want to do inquiry between this hour and this hour, or in this time and this time. And some other people are going to put their name, and then you're going to find each other, you know, in the cyberspace on WhatsApp or Zoom or Skype or or FaceTime or whatever you can use. And you can do inquiry every day if you want, more than once a day if you want, with different people, so that you can have also different mirrors. So we are trying to organize things in such a way that you can really use your time and all your resources in the way that you feel like, you know, but that you keep yourself in movement for those 3 weeks. So the webinar is 3 modules, but the work is going to be for 3 to 5 weeks if you really jump into it. Okay,